Hey Shannon, as promised through a text that I sent you a little while ago, I wanted to give you a really quick overview of some of the things that we presented at our Diya Research and Ministry gathering last week. We had about 40 individuals there, each representing an organization, or I should say maybe two-thirds of them representing an organization. We had our Young Adult Advisory Council, which was about 10. And then we also had nonprofit leaders that were doing innovative stuff with young adults, and then also denominational leaders. And so one person, one organization. So we had a pretty robust representation together. And this particular gathering was to give an update on our research stuff that we've built on since the last gathering that we had a year ago, May. And also since we've shared some stuff with Lily and the Young Adult Initiative cohort as well. So I want to just give you this first piece, and then I'll take a break, and then I'll give you the second piece in another file, and you can like peruse this how you want. I'll also give you the a PDF of the slides for you to have as well. So this particular section, that what we did in this session was we've been working really hard to take the 7 transitions that we've been working on and really try to distill them into more accessible language. This came out of the work that we did through our nationwide survey of 1,044 participants, but we followed up with 34 in-depth interviews from that pool of 1,044. So we were able to have a thicker description of how they talked about transition, and through that work, we really tried to distill some more accessible ways to talk about transitions. Because if you remember from our Lily presentation, it was really, really helpful and great for that particular group, but it was somewhat technical, and we wanted to make something a little bit more accessible for the ministry leader and for young adults themselves. So you might remember that our research question for this whole project has been, where are the prevalent transitions that young adults encounter as they negotiate an often less defined path from adolescence to adulthood? There's lots of reasons why we think transitions are important. They're going through them. This is where they're seeking support. These are both practical and spiritual. And we feel like this is the place that we can show up where they say they need us the most. And so, as I mentioned, we had the literature review and the survey that we did, and then the followed up with interviews, which led to this definition of transition: a new, challenging, exciting, and disorienting experiences that emerging adults encounter as they navigate life changes and make choices to take responsibility for their lives and relationship. And you'll remember that what's unique about this definition is that there's an element of experience where sometimes transition is evoked because of something that's happened to the emerging adult, life's circumstances or events or whatever. And there are also times where a transition is instigated by the emerging adult as they step into new spaces and move toward adulthood. They're actually doing that as well. So transition can be something that's received that they have to navigate, and other times it's actually instigated because of the choices that they make. Our survey included the grand parameter of 23 to 29-year-olds. They identify as Christian, live in the United States, and report experiencing a memorable change or transition in their 20s. You remember that oftentimes we talk about transition as kind of being this hot mess of a lot of things going on that we learn from the literature. What we've done with the transitions is try to make this more manageable, to say, actually, we think that there are 7 transitions that emerging adults are most likely to go through. And this is where the terms begin to change. And I'm going to just take you really quickly through this. I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on it. You can look at the slides. First and foremost, we sort of took this much more technical definition that I showed you before and tried to simplify it to this, that for a young adult, transition for them is, I'm trying to find my way between what has been and what's about to be. Okay, so there's sort of this liminal space, this in-between space where they're setting things down and picking up new things and trying to figure that out. The first transition is self-identifying, who I'm becoming in all of its complexity and intersectionality. You remember that this idea of identity is the emerging adults working of trying to harmonize who they are, where they came from, their gender, their race, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their religious backgrounds. All these different factors go into the work that's associated with that. And you'll remember from our last presentation, we learned a lot from the survey about ways that they're not only experiencing this transition, but also trying to work through it. What we've added in this time, and again, I won't read this all to you, is a thicker description of some ways that some of our participants actually talked about these transitions. And I think this is where it really gets really visceral and really humanizing as we think about these. And again, I'll let you read these on your own. The second transition is the relating transition. This is who I'm trusting in light of my past, present, and future relationships. So this is the negotiating of family and friends, of old friendships and letting them go sometimes, creating new friendships, reaching out in a vulnerable state, and also sometimes putting up barriers. And so again, from our research, there's lots of things going on here, but we really learned from this upper left, 82% experiencing fallout with their good friends, just the prevalence of good friends, especially from college, ghosting each other, where they're really sort of wrestling with this, all of a sudden, this disappearance of certain friends in their lives. The relating transition has to do with, again, there's just some more, here's another quote here that you can look at. And then the contributing transition, the third one, this is what I'm contributing for the betterment of myself and others. What's really interesting about this is I think before we sort of had this idea of a vocational transition, but we felt that that was too narrow. This idea of contributing is a bit broader, taking into account the ways that I'm giving myself to not only fulfill my aspirations, but also in many ways to support others. This really came through in our data from our survey that while people are looking for jobs and everything else and working through that, in many ways they're looking to also find making good contributions in life as well. What's interesting about this is that we found as we talked and worked with the interviews that this isn't always just aspirational. This is oftentimes very practical too. So it's what I want to be or what I sense God is calling me to, and at the same time, I've got to pay the bills. And so this is part of the contributing piece. This idea of taking responsibility we found was really, really crucial. This is how I'm bearing more of the weight and direction of my life and relationships once held by adults. So there's this shift that sort of happens as who's sort of holding the responsibility weight in one's life. And this comes through in a lot of different ways that we pulled up from the survey, whether it's supporting a family member, whether it's working on one's finances, many are even parenting. This sort of takes on this responsibility of not only being responsible for myself, but sometimes being responsible for others as well. And here's another quote for you to reflect on. The self-caring is what we used to call wellness transition. This is how I'm caring for myself now that my well-being is up to me. So again, this is a bit similar to the responsibility transition, but this is really dealing with this idea of physical and mental health. And what we noticed from the surveys was that this wasn't just maybe a health problem that emerged in their 20s. Sometimes it was a lifelong child illness that oftentimes have been held by, say, the parents or a legal guardian or a community, and now they realize that they have to take responsibility for their wellness. And oftentimes even come to grips with something in their lives that they know is going to be with them forever. So again, our survey points out some of these statistics. And then also, this is a really moving quote about someone that is dealing with a lifelong ailment and really sort of working through that and even beginning to question God. Remember, transitions can have a practical sense, but also this epistemological sense as well. Acclimating, you might remember before that transition was more of like this idea of institutional location transition, geographical transition. That's what we talked about. And we felt like really the term here is this idea of acclimating. And what we would say is it's where I'm putting down shallow roots trying to thrive there. So here's sort of the experience of a young adult that is trying to grow in wherever they are planted. In a new institution, a new job, or even a new location, knowing full well, though, that they may not be there forever. So the roots are starting to go down, but they're also shallow. There's hope, but then there's also a bit of hesitancy in this as well. And so the stats back this up. And then this particular quote, the young adult actually uses the term acclimating, and I think it really inspired us to think about this transition. And then meaning making, is the way that we're talking about what we've called before the religious or spiritual transition. This is how I'm seeking to make sense of my life, connecting my spirituality with a community. There's a bunch of moves that we've made for this. In some ways, it's just to broaden this category a little bit. But we feel like what we saw with young adults was them working through two things. First of all, the assumption that they have some sense of spirituality, whether it's even atheism or whether it's theism or whatever it is. There's something that's driving the meaning that they're making in life. And there is this impulse to want to connect with some sort of community. And so what we like about this definition is it sidesteps the are young adults going to church or not, and asking a deeper question of what is the spirituality of young adults and how are they acting on it in such a way that they're trying to find connection along the way. Again, you can see the stats that we've shared before with regards to that. And then one young adult that is sort of reimagining their relationship with God after their father had died. So these are the 7 transitions in the terminology that we are turning toward using. We've tested it with the gathering that we had last week, and it seems to be resonating with leaders. We hope to continue to find ways to simplify these terms in order to make them memorable, and we think it's going to be really, really helpful. We're really excited. This fall, we're going to do a podcast series on the 7 transitions. And so we're really looking forward to testing this and pushing this a little bit further. I've talked a little bit about this before, of just not only transitions being sort of a psychosocial term, but also this idea that it has this deep meaning theologically. And what's been interesting is that I've shared all this with you before, so I'm not going to do it again. But I think this idea of process truth and arrival truth is really resonating with leaders. Like, it is a bullet point in the slide of our over 150 slide deck that we had. But this seems to stand out, and I think there's some really interesting implications associated with that we're hoping to push on. So that is the transitions. I've kind of rambled through this rather quickly, but I wanted you to see that. You can go back and watch this and listen to my winsome voice, or at least look at the PDF and look at the slides. But just wanted to give you an update on that. Okay, my friend.